Thank you so much. It's great to be with a lot of new faces and also some familiar faces, all of these folks across the country who are helping to make the country better for children and youth. As I said earlier in the sound check, my name is Sharif Moodie. I use he, him, and il pronouns. I'm located in Treaty 13 Territory, Toronto, and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of the Students' Commission of Canada, La Commission des étudiants du Canada. And we're a national intergenerational charity that purposely works with others to put young people's ideas for improving themselves, their peers, and their communities into action. We're very focused on making sure young people have a voice in the decisions that affect them. And so today, my colleague and I, Kwaku Ajimang, who you've also met in the sound check, will be sharing some of the voice that we have gathered on some very specific topics of concern to young people from coast to coast to coast. We'll be sharing, we're not sharing my voice or even Kwaku's voice, we're sharing the voice of the thousands of young people that we've worked with over the years who have been committing to youth policies, youth systems change across the country. We're really grateful for the opportunity to support this work and are really glad to be connected to Senator Moodie, who's been a champion of this work. And so really glad to kick us off today on the second day of the Roundtable. We want to share with you first, before we get into the specific topics, the 5 guiding lenses that inform how we look at issues. So the first one is addressing structural racism. We look at every issue through the lens of how is this issue or recommendation that we're generating going to try to address structural racism, or how could it potentially or unintentionally perpetuate structural racism? We also look at all of the recommendations that we produce as an organization through the lens of truth leading to reconciliation, by answering the question of how does this allow Canada to move forward on its commitments and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, and also on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We think about how our recommendations improve the lives of children and youth in rural and remote and northern communities. That's our third lens. We think about what might be different in our recommendation for a young person who lives in an urban community and a young person who might live in a rural, remote, and northern community. We also think about how our recommendations will support Canada's commitment or reinforce Canada's commitment to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, making sure that we're honoring our obligations as a country to put those rights into action and to live and breathe those rights. Our organization plays a particular role in ensuring that Articles 12 and 17 of the convention are put in place, specifically access to information, and then the opportunity for young people to make decisions on issues that matter to them. Those are the 2 articles that we focus on in Canada trying to implement. But we look broadly when thinking about our recommendations on how this is going to either meet the obligations under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and exceed those obligations. Finally, our 5th guiding lens is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. How are we generating recommendations that are going to leave a healthier, more prosperous, and a world that young people can inherit that's better than the one from previous generation? And we use those many sustainable development goals to inform and focus the recommendations that we generate. All of these lenses help us focus. There's so many different voices, but help us focus the way in which we present these recommendations for action and change. And my colleague Kwaku now is going to share a little bit of the kind of concrete recommendations that young people have shared with us over the past few years that we hope will inform this child and youth strategy.
Thank you, Sharif. Yes, hello everyone. As mentioned, my name is Kwaku. I use he, him pronouns. Calling here from Toronto, Ontario. And yeah, to share, going through sharing, I'll be using the word Canada we want. The Canada we want is how, youth have expressed, their hopes and dreams for how Canada can support them on issues that impact them the most. And so if you hear me say Canada we want a lot, that's where we're leading with. And so on the first focus areas, we have the 5 focus areas that young people have identified that could really support them around employment, health, education, climate action, and supporting youth in care. And so, to start us off on the topic of employment, young people have expressed that the Canada that we want, the work world we want, supports them, in finding and maintaining healthy employment spaces, removing, barriers within employment spaces on discrimination, getting rid of unethical work practices. Young people have identified, a multifaceted approach is needed, which includes, addressing these issues through various government policies and programs and working hand in hand with workplaces so that workplaces can see the value in hiring young people. At the Students Commission, we really practicing walking the talk, and we're an organization that prides itself on hiring a lot more young people and seeing youth employment as a program that supports the development of young people. So working through that multifaceted approach for other workplaces to see the same. Next is health. Over the past few years, young people have expressed, that healthcare in Canada is, being attacked, and young people have identified that, Canada should, prioritize improved, equitable, and accessible access to healthcare, especially sexual education and healthcare support for young people. By addressing the needs and experiences of all youth, including those of diverse gender identities and sexual orientations, we can really ensure that all young people have access to the resources they need to lead healthy and fulfilling lives. Young people have also emphasized that evolving youth voice and youth led initiatives in shaping inclusive and effective healthcare policies. Education was a really big one. The strong points that young people have expressed in many of our programs and reports is that, we really need a national curriculum standards, updated key curriculum areas, really fostering cultural respect is crucial for preparing students for the future. The increased push for smaller class sizes and community participation within schools to improve the overall education experience. This is in order to ensure that all students have access to a high quality, rights respecting education as, young people look forward to um, really moving towards being enterprising citizens in Canada. Climate action. Climate action is was another strong point that young people have expressed, in that, the need for educating children and youth about the environment and what that looks like, what does climate change look like, and really having that support through the formal education system, and really exploring nature-based education. How can we use the new technology? How can we leverage technology to support the reduction of paper use and monitor air pollution while holding companies accountable for their emissions? Improving support and opportunities for Indigenous communities to build sustainable infrastructure. The Canada we want, increases access to clean water, affordable and clean energy, and providing a more sustainable environment for future generations. We need to address structural racism and reconciliation in efforts to combat climate change and providing more support for rural, remote, and northern communities. The youth at our conferences and our programs and workshops have expressed the importance of these recommendations for a future in which all citizens have access to a clean and sustainable environment. Youth and care. At the Students Commission, we've done a lot of work to improve the child well-being system, and youth have identified the following key themes. A healthy child well-being system, involves consistency, relationship building, trauma-informed care, and accountability. We must consider the perspectives and recommendations of these youth and to create a system that prioritizes their well-being and success. So those are the points that young people have shared. And of course, we at the Students Commission, we continue to engage, listen to these voices as a privilege, and see how we can amplify them and work across sectors. I'll pass it back over to Sharif.
Thank you very much, Kwaku, for sharing some of the highlights from some of the work that we've done over the past few years. And we hope that these pieces will inform the strategy. We want to close just by sharing the importance of grounding any strategy in values. At the Students' Commission of Canada, we use 4 pillars, which are the key values of the work that we do. Respect for young people and their capacity to change the world, respect for all people and the unique gifts they carry within. We believe in granting respect versus earning respect. When we respect, we can actually listen. Our second pillar, we can listen with all of our, we can listen for silences, for deeds, for written word, for art, for any way in which young people and others express themselves. When we listen, we can truly understand. That's when we put ourselves in the shoes of others. That's when we can develop empathy, see the world from a different place. With those 3 pillars in place, the obstacles fall away, and that's when we communicate the change that we want to see in the world. Those are our 4 pillars that inform how we do the work that we do and how we want to build a better world for ourselves and also for future generations. And we strongly believe that it will be important for any strategy to be grounded in values. We've supported the Government of Canada in the past in developing the first ever youth policy and worked really hard to make sure that in that youth policy, there were clear values and guiding principles that defined it and clear theme areas. And we also think that that focus will go a long way to making this strategy something that can live and breathe for years to come. With that, I will pass it back to the moderators and also extend some heartfelt gratitude to Senator Moodie and your whole team for pulling us all together to try to build the Canada we want, a place where young people's voices are heard and valued. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Sharif and Kwaku, for that presentation. I will now invite Être, Devenir to take the stage, as it were, and start their presentation.
Let's start again. Hello, I'm Kevin Morris, Director of Youth Center here in the Gatineau, and so I'm going to introduce topics, and then Danielle is going to follow up. I'm speaking on the strategies that connect with the point of view of youth, especially the strategy.
Don't mean to interrupt. I'm just wondering if you can get a little closer to the microphone or adjust it. We're just getting a note from the interpreters. The sound quality is not quite.
Okay.
I don't. Yeah, right. Tell them that we're.
How is that?
The sound of the room and not the sound of the mic.
Keep. Just give us a sentence or so.
Yes. Well, I'm speaking on strategies that connect with the point of view of youth.
Tell them it's the sound.
These microphones are made to pick up, and yeah, those big microphones, they're like recording studio stuff.
I don't know if that works or not. It worked yesterday. We haven't changed.
So we're gonna say go ahead and continue, but we have gotten a note that it may be difficult for interpretation to interpret.
Oh, I see.
With the microphone, so I'm not sure what the difference is because I know, Daniel, you did do a sound check and it was fine earlier. So
can we get specifics about in what way is the sound quality not good?
Interpreters require.
Yes.
Is there any feedback from the interpreters about what's wrong with the sound?
I guess I can hear you, but I don't know if it's going to the Zoom.
No, they cannot hear the interpreter.
Okay, can we just proceed then?
Oh, they have to switch the channel if they want to hear the interpreter.
But she's speaking into the English channel.
So exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically what the interpreter is telling us is that I think it's just because of the type of microphone that you have, it's a little bit fuzzy. So Daniel, when you were speaking closer to the mic, it was a little bit better. But I think it really is just the type of microphone that you're using.
Okay. Okay, let's just proceed. Okay, so I'm especially coming from the strategy that youth centers define, where youth themselves have developed the best practices in engaging youth. Our youth center operates in the rural area as well. In the Gatineau Hills, it's about an hour north of Ottawa, Hull, on the Quebec side. Being become Être, Devenir operated for the last 10 years in community halls and libraries in 4 of the villages in this region. Now, finally, we have a central facility located in the Venastas train station that we renovated. The abandoned building was donated to us, and it now operates as a regional youth resource center. The Wesley M. Nicol Foundation funded about half of this renovation. The director, Bruce Nicol, he was on the board of Operations Come Home in Ottawa, which focuses on street kids. Street kids are mostly kids who come from rural areas. The mayor of Hull asked us about the same question about their problem. But eventually, youth land on the streets of cities across Canada. Bruce funded us mainly because he was familiar with the risk factors that eventually lands youth onto the lands youth onto the streets of different cities. The other main factor that supports this youth center and the strategy is the core funding from PSOC, which is a department of CISO, the Quebec Health Services sector. PSOC funds about 300 youth centers across Quebec. Newfoundland and Labrador and the Northwest Territories, when I used to work with Youth Centers Canada, and I think they still fund, they also provide operating funds for youth centers. They did when I worked, like I said. Geneviève Guilbeault, who's the Deputy Premier of Quebec, she has been the Minister of Public Security and spoke of the importance of youth centers in reducing youth at risk behavior. I understand that funding of youth centers play a large role in reducing crime, likely why I understand Quebec, I believe, has the lowest rate of youth crime. It's obvious that communities across Canada need youth centers in their strategy. Youth need safe spaces, and anonymity is essential. Youth talking with youth happen in youth centers. Youth circles form. We are starting up a youth club and purchasing some new media equipment. The so-called social media that dominates the media are not social. But when youth find themselves in a protective and supportive space, well, youth voices, youth stories, teams are formed. Creative ideas lead to other policies. They also happen because it's fun in this space. Thunder Bay presenter mentioned the importance of peer mentors during our recent Quebec employment project, similar to the federal Skills Link projects. A few community members and elders also stepped forward with presentations, workshops, and 2 elders became mentors. The strategy in itself isn't enough. It needs some meat in it. Core funding of youth centers mostly go into staffing and youth outreach workers. If there was a national youth center fund, that will define, I think, a national strategy. Well, the funding could match provincial youth center funding. This will incentivize provinces, and most of them do not fund youth centers. This would incentivize provinces to adopt the strategy. The police don't they don't succeed well as outreach workers. Also, social workers confined to offices aren't enough as well. A youth dropping into a doctor's office, especially in rural areas, gossip quickly happens. And just look at the rise of family abuse. A women's shelter near Quebec has had to turn away 3,000 mothers because of lack of space. That's a similar topic. Lack of transportation is another barrier, especially in rural areas. A national strategy needs to address isolation, and spreading optic fibers don't alone foster person-to-person communication. I think a North Bay group, a youth group, once received a federal grant to purchase a van. It was actually the Canada Arts Council for a mobile production van. That's a start. I also wonder, did Thunder Bay finally give youth free bus fare? When I was up there last, that was a big issue. So that's enough for me for now.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm just gonna speak as a youth, sort of in the transition period between being a youth in school to being an adult, independent, and finding a skill to pursue as a career, and just sorting out my life. So I'm just gonna speak from my experience as somebody growing up and going out there into the world. So it's really tricky to make that transition from being a youth in school to being out there on your own. You have to learn to pay your taxes. You have to learn, you have to find a way of getting around transportation. You need to find a job. Just a lot of things have to come together to get your life straight. And I think that those things should be part of the strategy. So helping youth transition from being in school to being independent adults. I don't know what those strategies look like. It might involve giving courses on how to pay your taxes. It might involve for people who need to learn how to drive. If they don't live in a big city, if they live in a rural place, they need to know how to drive. So providing an easy way of getting youth in transition to be able to drive. That's key for a lot of jobs. That's key. You need to get around. You need to get to your place of employment. So allowing that, especially for rural communities, like providing the means by which they can get employment and a way of getting to that job. I think that's really key for a lot of people. So I'm working here in Venosτα, Quebec, at a youth center. And in order to work with youth, you need to get a vulnerable sector police check. I think that's the case for people working with youth across Canada. And right now, the process takes way too long. So the vulnerable sector police check, it has to go through the RCMP. The RCMP has a database of previous sexual offenders. I think that's the main gist of that. And so the process of getting your police check back takes 2 to 3 months. And that's not great for youth organizations if they need to do a police check. So that's an issue that I think should be addressed in the context of organizations working with youth, making it easy for those organizations to get staff and those staff to be able to do what they're hired to do. So those are just some thoughts from me. And that commences our presentation, or stops our presentation.
Perfect, thank you. Great timing. I was actually just about to jump in and give you a 2-minute warning. So you're perfectly on time. At this point, I will open up the Q&A. If anybody has any questions or comments they want to make for our first two presenters, please go ahead and raise your hand. Sénatrice Odette? Parfait. Allez-y.
J'ai mis mes écouteurs. Vous m'entendez?
Plus ou moins.
Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour. M'entendez-vous?
Oui, c'est bon.
Merci. Désolée du retard et encore une fois, merci à la sénatrice Moodie et toute son équipe de nous mobiliser autour de ce qu'on a déjà été, des jeunes, et maintenant responsables de petits êtres lumière. Si je comprends bien, là, merci beaucoup pour votre présentation, de ne pas oublier dans une stratégie les habiletés, les bases d'une habileté de jeune adulte qui devient adulte officiel, là. Donc ça, faut se rappeler. Pourquoi je vous dis ça, c'est que dans les années fin 90, les Autochtones au Canada, on avait le programme PAPEN pour les parents pour reprendre des habiletés parentales. Mais je comprends qu'en 2023, nos enfants qui deviennent des adultes ont certainement besoin, eux et elles aussi, d'avoir cette base-là qu'on prend peut-être pour acquis. I can say it in English if you want, but I want to say thank you. Thank you very much. You understood my question?
I get the background. What specifically is your question? Like,
Okay.
Are you asking about what are those foundational skills, or?
No. I understand that if there is, and we hope, a national strategy, that we don't forget that what you share to us, the basic skill, the knowledge when we become adult, because of 18 years old in some country, but here it's the same, that like what we hear yesterday from another amazing speaker, that after the DPG, boom, he's on his own. And there's thousands of people like that. We don't need to be on the DPG system. It could be my own kids that when they become adult, and if I didn't, or I wasn't able to share to him the basic skill of what is to be autonomous, what you mentioned. So it reminded me that, we have to make sure it should be in the national strategy. So is it something that you would see?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that looks like practically.
Me too.
A few skills come to mind. Okay, so in order to be a good, healthy adult, you need to know a little bit about nutrition, and hopefully the school system is teaching about that. You need to know how to interact with doctors to receive care. You need to have access to, I don't know how driver's licenses work across the country, but in Quebec, you need to do driver's ed. So if you're in a rural community, how easy is it for you to get driver's ed? So there's a health, there's emotional health. So can you regulate your emotions effectively? Can you deal with emotions? That's something adults hopefully learn, right? How to manage anger, how to manage the trauma, what have you. So having those skills, and right now I don't think those are taught in schools, but they're real skills, and they're important to the success of an adult. Yeah, so yeah, that's I hope I answered your question.
Thanks so much, Daniel, for that answer. Senator Kutcher?
Thank you very much, and thank you to our presenters and to everybody who's here and who has worked so hard to have this really important meeting happen. I want to ask the presenters, but also the ones that are coming ahead for the rest of the day to think about this issue and give me your thoughts on it. As the pandemic experience has taught us, the impact of health misinformation can be deadly for many people, and that the quality of health literacy and mental health literacy in our Canadian population needs to be improved substantively. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how a national health strategy or a national strategy for youth could ensure that it incorporates excellent health and mental health literacy, and how that could be best achieved.
The other presenter can go for it.
Yeah, I could approach this. I could take a stab, and if any folks want, I'd love to hear folks' thoughts on this. I kind of also want to connect this to Daniela's question in the chat as well, connected around accountability measures. Yeah, we do feel like health literacy and accessing truthful health information is key for young people, and we've seen that through the pandemic be a threat that limits and increases more barriers for youth accessing quality healthcare. One of the on the UN Convention on the Rights of Child is access to information, and so we feel that the government of Canada should really work towards investing in information, communication, and really tapping into the new innovative channels and really leaning into social media on sharing information, promotion of that. We've seen through the pandemic there's been I forgot what the key research term around it was in terms of different spaces or pockets, algorithms within social media that allows different young people to take information from different sources that might lead to a lot of misinformation. And so how can the government really work with researchers, healthcare professionals, to really tap into spaces where that information is really accessible. And on the flip side, with accountability is following up, having that feedback loop closed. It's like we've provided this promotion and information on how to access quality healthcare, investing in healthcare, and decreasing the barriers that limit young people for accessing that healthcare. And you made a great last person. I don't want to get the name wrong. Daniel, you made that key point on transitioning to a successful adulthood knows how to knowing how to take care of yourself, knowing how to seek support from doctors, knowing how to obtain family doctors, getting the healthcare. Having the government support young people do that really early on, and really tapping into how young people are accessing healthcare information and really closing that loop can go a long way into combating healthcare misinformation we're seeing on social media, as well as ensuring young people are getting the right care, right information, and quality care.
Great, thank you so much, Daniel. Did you want to?
Yeah, let's see, I'll jump in here. Kwaku, he made so many good points there. The main way that you get their information seems to be through social media. So that's right on. If you're trying to inform youth and more broadly just Canadians about just correct information about their health, I think social media is definitely the platform to use. Another approach is through the school system. Like, I think if youth learn the basic a basic model of what science is, how it works, and why it works, they're probably more likely to trust the results of science, and that's what the huge portion of what health is the science. So if you have a trust in the systems by which scientific truth is derived, then you're way more likely to trust your recommendations from doctors and other health professionals. So increasing trust and understanding of science.
Thanks so much, Daniel. Cheyenne, is your comment on this particular topic, or is it a separate question? Because we have a question in the chat, so I just want to know. Okay, so I'll go to on this topic. Okay, so I'll let you go ahead and make your comment on this, and then we'll go to the question from the chat.
Sure. Yeah, I think what both Kwaku and Danielle said is bang on. I think for me, it's really about accessibility, because without accessibility, the information is either going to be misinformed, or it's just not going to reach the right ears or ears at all. And so we have to remember that the children, young people population is very diverse, right? We have people who need translations. We have people who don't necessarily speak English. We have people who are, who are deaf as well, right? And blind and so on and so forth. So what is accessibility in this manner? Do we have interpretation in terms of ASL when it's needed, when there's important information that's being shared? Do we have the right type of print media for people who are having a hard time seeing, right? So I think accessibility is very important. The other thing is that even when we look at youth homelessness, for example, I like to take an upstream approach. Upstream approaches start from the schools, as Danielle was saying, but I'm gonna say it from a different perspective. Our young people spend most of their lives in schools. School is where they're supposed to be spending their lives under the age of 16, right? And if we know this, then we need to utilize that those institutions to better equip our young people to understand literacy, not just health literacy, but just media literacy in general. How do you differentiate between false information and true information? How do you add rigor? How do you research? These are skills that are lifelong and that are needed lifelong. And so for me, it needs to start in schools. And also we have to remember that newcomer populations, which I'm a part of, I know my parents and grandparents, they love WhatsApp, and WhatsApp is the media for misinformation. Like it's like a cesspool. So schools are very important to get at the young people so they go back home to inform their parents as well. It's a trickle effect. So I totally agree with Daniel that school needs to be a priority factor for our young people as well.
Thanks so much for that comment, Cheyenne. I'm going to go ahead and read a question that we got in the chat. So the question is from Daniela Bendo. Says, thanks so much to both groups for the great presentations. I wonder if any of the presenters would like to comment on their viewpoints for accountability measures, and if they think these might be important / what this might look like based on the recommendations you provided. And then there's a specific question for Daniel. Daniel, you provided some really great practical solutions. Regarding transportation, do you have any ideas on how specifically to help youth navigate transportation barriers? What might be helpful? So Daniel, if you want to jump in and answer that question first.
Okay. I think I'll answer that question and Kwaku can answer the other if that works. Does that work? Okay. Let's see. Okay. Well, if you're in the country, you need a vehicle, and so and you need that to get to work. So subsidies for youth buying vehicles. I don't know, some way. Yeah, in cities, like you can get around by bus normally or by bike. And so I think that's pretty much covered, unless there's accessibility issues for some youth taking those modes of transportation. yeah, I don't know. I don't have many practical instantiations of like in terms of policy, but
I can mention one instance where we had about 5 or 6 youth wanting to take driver's licenses, a driver's license test, and we could not get a company from the city to come up 1 hour to give a group instructions and the test. They just would not come up. So that in itself was a big barrier.
awesome. That's the best we can do, I think.
Great, thanks so much. You got put on the spot there, Daniel. You did a good job. Kwaku, if you want to answer the first question, and I'm happy to repeat it if you need.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel, for that as well. On accountability measures is really important, and in our recommendation that we provided, on the topic of employment, health, education, climate action, and really looking forward to improving child and well-being systems in Canada, and youth and care. It's really important to see that on an individual, social, and system level, success for young people in all of these outcomes is thriving for themselves, is thriving for their communities, but also thriving for a well-being society in Canada. And when we look at, employment, having, access to employment opportunities, healthy employment opportunities, means that young people will work, can find healthy work and contribute to our economy in a meaningful way. In a meaningful way, which is also meaningful for themselves and seeing through that career. And across all lines, of course, same with, health, being healthy in society, physical, mental, sexual health, and ensuring that, we're looking at our education, and how we are really reaching young people. Like Cheyenne, you made that great point. Young people, we've been in schools for a good part of our lives. Some of us go back to school and we keep learning. We keep learning outside of academic spaces. And so how can the government continue to support that? And accountability plays a really key role in all of that, and how, young people have provided youth voice to the government for years. A lot of the reports that we've seen come out, and we can reflect on Canada's first national youth policy, the State of Youth report, a lot of work that organizations have been doing across to gather youth voice. We're seeing we do see innovations in what youth voice is being to be relevant to our society today. But how can we work towards holding the government accountable? How can we work holding Canada accountable to ensuring that we hear these youth voices and we are, putting in place policies and reporting back to youth is key, to say, hey, we heard your voice. This is what we did. This is the policies that's come about from this, and how do we measure the impact and outcomes of the changes and programs put in place. So I hope I was answering Daniela on where you're hoping the accountability piece. Yeah, so.
Great, thank you for that great answer, Kwaku. Sénatrice Mégy.
Merci. Alors, merci à la sénatrice Moodie pour organiser un tel événement. Puis merci aux 2 groupes qui ont parlé ce matin. Et justement, je m'adresse à vous. C'est pas vraiment une question, mais c'est un commentaire qui pourrait peut-être vous inspirer. Pas que j'aie la prétention de ça, mais ça pourrait. Lors de l'épicentre lorsqu'on parlait du fait que Montréal-Nord, au Québec, était l'épicentre de la COVID, on avait mobilisé toute la population, surtout la section municipale. Et on a pu trouver ce qui accrochait pour envoyer l'information à tout le monde, parce qu'il y avait des groupes, y compris les groupes de la communauté haïtienne qui parlaient créole. On voulait qu'ils aient accès à toutes les informations du gouvernement. Donc, ce qui a été fait par certains groupes dont j'ai fait partie à l'époque, on a demandé qu'on traduise les textes en créole, et finalement, ça aboutit à la traduction en plusieurs langues pour que tout le monde ait accès à toutes les informations de la santé publique. Alors là, c'est pour vous expliquer le contexte. Alors, j'ai entendu dire par Sharif ce matin
que un des points dans la stratégie, c'était de faire attention à tout ce qui est écrit ou produit par les jeunes. Alors, je me suis dit, comme la COVID, c'était quelque chose de bien ciblé, mais pourquoi on ne continuerait pas à faire la même chose avec ce qui est écrit par les jeunes? N'oubliez pas que quand je parle à mes petits-enfants de ce qui s'est dit à la télé, ils rient de moi parce que ce n'est pas le médium qui les intéresse. Donc, est-ce qu'on ne pourrait pas utiliser le médium que les médias que les jeunes utilisent le plus et utiliser leur langage? Donc, les messages devraient être écrits selon leur façon de parler, justement pour faire suite à la littératie du sénateur Couture et ce que Cheyenne a proposé par rapport au WhatsApp et tout ça. Essayer d'aller trouver les médias qui les intéressent et qu'ils écoutent le plus et faire écrire les messages par les jeunes. Mais ça peut commencer par le niveau municipal, mais si c'est écrit dans votre stratégie nationale, ça pourrait être comme le flambeau qui se passe du national au provincial et au municipal, mais au moins le mentionner. Et justement, on pourrait continuer à tenir compte de ce qui est écrit par les jeunes, ce qui est dans votre proposition, et aussi combler les lacunes que causerait une littératie de trop haut niveau et que les autres, ce serait leur langage à eux. Pas parce qu'il n'y ait pas de bon niveau, mais vous savez, les langues évoluent. Dans chaque communauté ou langue, il y a une évolution dans les termes utilisés selon ce qui se passe. Donc, ça pourrait être ça. Et ça pourrait, d'après moi, aider. Mais bon, je vous lance ça comme ça, compte tenu de l'expérience que j'ai vécue avec la COVID. Donc, je me suis dit que peut-être, ça pourrait vous inspirer dans votre travail, dans l'élaboration de la stratégie. Alors, c'est tout. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Sénatrice Meiji. Are there any other questions or comments in the room?
This is Moffat. I'm trying to communicate and I'm having problems with my laptop, but I hope you can hear me now.
We can. The sound quality is a little bit iffy, but
okay, thank you.
Go ahead, and if it's a problem, we'll ask you just to type it in the chat.
Okay, I just wanted to add a comment to what Kevin, the presentations about safe spaces for youth, like youth centers and peer mentors. Our presenter Cameron said that yesterday. I was at a First Nations forum. I'm in Thunder Bay, Ontario. The name is Moffat. And there was a forum about what they call the 7 Youth Inquest. These are Indigenous youth who died in the city of Thunder Bay while they were attending school. And one thing that came over and over was the need
Moffat?
For safe spaces. Yes?
I don't mean to cut you off. We've gotten word from our interpreters that the sound quality is not sufficient for their needs. So if you would be willing to put the rest of your commentary in the chat and we'll read it out. We're just trying to, again, it's a health and safety issue, as we mentioned at the beginning.
I'll try to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Were there any other comments or questions in the room? Going once? Going twice? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and say then that we can take our break now. So we are a little bit ahead of schedule. Tropicana and Africa Center, are you prepared to present a little bit early?
Tropicana Community Services is.
Africa Center is.
Perfect. Thank you very much. In that case, I'm going to go ahead and say that we'll take a 15-minute break right now and we'll return at 11:30. And just a reminder for those of you who weren't here at the beginning, due to some illnesses and cancellations, we're consolidating our schedule a little bit today, so we will have 3 presentations in the next block. I should also check, Cheyenne, you're also okay to present a little early?
I am good to go, yes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so we'll see you back here at 11:30.